how do I best frame introducing a new ED who is not local to our community? I'm a marketing director for a medium-sized nonprofit that serves seniors in our community who are on the verge of homelessness. We're preparing for an executive director change with our new ED starting next week. The new ED has lots of experience in our field, but is from out of state, so isn't familiar with the nuances of our community. I'm concerned that someone from out of state will have an uphill battle not being local, and I'm wondering if you have any ideas of how I can frame the message to ensure this new ED is welcomed and that our cause doesn't lose supporters in the process.
It's an interesting question because to me, I go, how cool that you got someone from out of state and maybe they've got some different experiences. And yet, I'm guessing because you're asking it, there must be something in the community you live in where there's some sort of fear or close-knit nature that's leading you to think that people will not welcome the outsiders. So, I think the proof is in the pudding is the way, is that old expression, right?
Whatever that means.
Whatever
exactly.
that means. I'm full of these weird little things that I'm not even sure where they come from or what they mean. But I do think thinking about, obviously, this ED was hired for a reason. Obviously, they had some success and probably some stories and probably even maybe some data from the organization they came from. And so as that press release or as the newsletter or whatever communications you have going out about this new ED, I think it's great to sort of build up, say, we're so excited. And it's people will pick up off of your energy. And, it was a thorough vetting process. And we felt like this person was best positioned to help take our organization to the next level because of X, Y, and Z. And here's some of the success they had, and here's how we think that can help our community. So I think just that messaging of sort of there was a thoughtful process, the person had success. I also think sometimes the messenger of these kinds of things makes a difference. So if people have trust of someone in your organization, it could be a funder, a board member, a staff member, and your key stakeholders have trust that person, if that person says this is a great new hire, then they're going to be more likely to think this is a great new hire and they're going to be more welcome to it. I think thinking about that, we all know that there's sort of those informal stakeholders in any organization that influence things based on what they say and their opinion and their feedback, and whether that's right or wrong or fair or not, it is a reality. And so figuring out how do you get the people who you want them to be sharing the excitement and energy around something like this to sort of be your messengers and champions, even on an informal level, I think is one way around it. So those are some initial thoughts. I would hope that, I also think this new person, they're going to have to prove themselves and they're going to have someone who makes some of those key introductions for them with introducing them to some of the key players in the community. And if this person is the leader that it sounds like they are, they're going to be able to, come right in, ask questions, come from a place of curiosity, and also come from a place of knowledge sharing that I think will speak for itself. It may take a little time, but I don't know. That's my 2 cents. How about you, Andy?
Yeah, I think it's actually an opportunity because if it's somebody local, somebody that everybody already knows, that person's sort of a known quantity in the community and everybody's got an opinion about them already. If it's somebody new from out of town, that gives like the board chair or the chair of the development committee or somebody the excuse to say to everybody else, hey, let me introduce you to this new person and then talk about how fantastic they are, right? Because they don't have any prior knowledge of whether or not they are fantastic or not. So it's a really good, you're introducing someone new. It's not just like, oh yeah, here's this person we stole from this other organization because they were familiar, right? I think it's a really good opportunity just for that good first impression you want to make. The only other thing is that, and it sounds like you've hired somebody who's going to be good at their job. If you hired somebody from out of state that has expertise in this particular area, the staff's going to be okay with it. Or your staff is going to be like, oh, we're decided to have somebody that knows what we're doing. And we didn't just hire the random HR guy that's retired from a local corporation, which happens sometimes, right? So yeah, I think you're in pretty good shape.
Nonprofit governance.
Nonprofit answers.
Nonprofit board.
Nonprofit management.
Nonprofit marketing.
Nonprofit resources. Welcome to Nonprofit Everything, the podcast where hosts Andy Shurick and Stacey Wedding answer your questions about all things nonprofit.
Welcome to another episode of Nonprofit Everything. I'm Andy Shurick, and I'm here with my fantastic co-host Stacey Wedding, and we are here to answer whatever questions you might have about the nonprofit sector. Are you a funder that is interested in learning more about what these nonprofits do and how you can make a better impact with your dollars? Or are you, like most of us, just in the grind, trying to figure out how to get the job done and just need some external advice from somebody who doesn't necessarily have a stake in what you're doing and is giving you like real, true answers? The way this podcasts work, it's a Q&A podcast. You send us questions and Stacey and I do our best to answer them. Or if we think we aren't going to do a great job, or we think it's a good opportunity to bring in a guest expert, we will bring in a guest expert to answer those questions for you as well. So please send the questions to us. That's how the podcast works. If you don't send us questions, we don't have anything to talk about and we'll just kind of dry up and blow away, and that wouldn't be fun at all. And with that, we'll jump right in.
My organization recently had to decline a gift offered by a potential donor since the cost of maintaining the gift would have been very high compared to the gift size. Also, the gift felt like a stretch to fit our mission. After several attempts to try and restructure the gift with the donor, we ultimately decided not to move forward. I am the lucky one who gets to share our organization's decision with the donor. How should I approach this? Do you think a conversation is enough, or should I put something in writing too?
Oh, yikes. This is, so just to make you feel better, this is not an uncommon scenario. And luckily, we've got some tools that we've developed over the years that deal with this exact thing. So one of the scenarios that comes up all the time is that a donor will decide that they've got a piece of real estate that they want to get rid of, that they could sell for a certain amount, but if they sell it, they have to pay capital gains tax on it. What that means is that they pay, 15% of whatever the difference is between the time that they acquired the property and the time that they're selling it. So if they sell it to like another organization, they're going to make a bunch of money and then have a massive tax hit. But if they give it to a nonprofit, then they don't actually have to pay the capital gains tax. They get the benefit of the donation, the full value of the donation, so fair market value for that property. And then the capital gains tax goes away because it was a charitable gift. And then they can use all of that money as the charitable gift to protect other kinds of income. So it's from a tax play perspective, it makes a lot of sense for a donor to say, hey, I've got this highly appreciated asset and it's really going to do me a good benefit to be able to find a nonprofit that's going to want to take this away from me. And us as nonprofits are like, oh, thank you. We love you. You're so great. Thank you for thinking of us and your mission. Wait, it's a what? It's a vacant lot downtown that also has like an oil spill on it. And there's currently like 150 squatters in a homeless encampment. Yeah. Right. So, and all of a sudden you're like, oh, this $15 million gift looks like a complete and total nightmare that somebody's handing you. And because we're nonprofits, we don't want to be mean. We don't want to be like, yeah, go away. That's ridiculous. How rude of you, right? We want to maintain the relationship. We want to make sure the donor thinks well of us. What we've developed then is the gift acceptance policy. And most likely, I mean, if you're in the scenario where donors are giving you or offering things like this, I'm going to say you probably already have a gift acceptance policy. It's something that, if you've got any people that are CFREs on your staff, that's something that AFP is very serious about having real gift acceptance policy and enforcing that. So look at the terms of your gift acceptance policy, and I can guarantee you that there's stuff in there that says, we're not going to accept gifts that do not fit our mission or would be excessively difficult for us to manage. So, and that falls directly into that category, in which case, you probably need to reach back out to the donor, and hopefully you're not just a poor development officer doing this. Hopefully you're like the CFO or the ED or something like that has to do this job. going back to the donor with the gift acceptance policy as proof that's saying, thank you so much for your offer, your generous offer. However, our gift acceptance policy prohibits us from accepting this gift. Is there, can we talk about some other way you might be able to make a charitable gift out of this? Maybe we can talk to one of our attorneys that does this kind of gift planning thing that can come up with some other way for you to get a tax benefit without having us have to manage a property, which would be against our gift acceptance policy, right? So coming in with like the solution in addition to the denial of, no, your ridiculous gift, I'm never, ever going to accept. So I think that's probably the right way to do it. And now Stacey's going to tell me why that's wrong.
Oh, no, not at all. I'm sitting here nodding my head at everything. And I guess I'm thinking, I'm sure the person who wrote this, if they're looking at more complex gifts, probably does have that gift acceptance policy. But if they don't, what I've seen other organizations do in this kind of circumstance is they still put together some sort of task force, ad hoc committee to explore and get the expertise they need to evaluate the gift, remove it away from the staff so you have expertise outside that knows how to handle these kinds of complex gifts so that you have a fallback, that it's not like it's a personal decision, right? It's not like I'm saying, no donor, I don't like you and I don't like your gift, that it's very much rooted, as you were talking about, Andy, in what is in the best interest of the organization. And that always has to be front and center. And I do think that the person who needs to deliver the message so if you don't have a gift acceptance policy, lean on some kind of a committee or task force, or you can say, gosh, we had this committee or task force, and it sounds like some of that already happened, but thinking about sharing with the donor, we have tried to, being really honest and transparent in that conversation. We have tried to slice this and dice this in every way. And we just, at the end of the day, ultimately can't accept it because of X. And we know that's probably not what you want to hear. So you just sort of address the elephant in the room right up front. And we're so sorry. We were trying to make this work because we would have loved to figure out a way, but this one isn't going to work. So maybe there will be opportunities in the future. And I think really trying to the gratitude piece to what you said, Andy, is huge in this. It also needs the message of this, have it be from the executive director, or if there's somebody else, so that the person in that development or fundraising role isn't the one having this conversation, because it really rises to a higher level when it gets to this stage, and it's a complex gift and there's a lot of hands on it. And it's also, you need to preserve that relationship that this development professional has with the donor. And the best way to do that is to sort of remove it a bit from that development professional. And so I think that is definitely a huge part of this. And as far as I know, the question was also should I put this in writing? I think anything like this needs to happen first with a phone call or something that's more of a personal touch, because it's just received better, right? Than you're laughing because you're probably
No, as soon as you said that, I'm like, oh, it's in writing. So, but could that include just a text? Is it okay to just text the donor back, no thanks? NOTHX. That's okay, right? That's in writing.
No, I know, right? And some people probably would do that these days. So I think that it's sort of, if you truly care about the relationship, it's about starting it with the conversation. And then some organizations, it kind of depends on your culture and your own policies around this stuff. Some people like to have these kinds of things documented in writing. So if that is something you want to make sure you've sort of documented and kind of protected against, I think being super very careful in how you word it, again, so that it's about, we tried doing X, Y, Z, showing you took the effort, and ultimately, based on expert advice, we've been guided not to do this, and we need to do what's in the best interest. But certainly would love, welcome other opportunities in the future to see if we can find something that works. And but always, right? All these things, difficult conversations, what do they say? They don't start with an email or a text saying no thanks, but they start with the conversation.
You know where these come up a lot is in, at least I've noticed, in silent auctions. So you'll do a silent auction, and then you have a committee that's going out to get things to put in the silent auction, and they come back with just absurd stuff that is no one's ever going to bid on. It's like a horrific piece of art that just is like amateur garbage that you like, and the artist is like, oh yeah, this is worth $750, and you're like, well, it might have $750 worth of paint on it. Like, but that's about I don't know if that's how you value art. Yeah. So you come up with ways to figure out that kind of stuff too. It's one of the reasons I am not a huge fan of silent auctions to begin with. It's like feels like someone's excuse to get rid of random trash. And then you have to have uncomfortable conversation with donors about, thank you, but we don't want your trash. We can't put that on our auction.
We're getting a lot of corporate volunteer requests for one-day projects, but it takes more time to organize them than the help we receive. How do we make these relationships actually beneficial?
Oh, this one's actually easier than you think. So the thing about corporate one-day volunteer projects is you need to look at them not as true volunteer projects where they're actually helping you do your mission, like that you're getting bodies to do a thing. This is your opportunity to show a whole bunch of people who are required to be there how amazing of an organization you are, so that when they get that direct mail piece in November, that they go, oh, I volunteered for them. That was so awesome. Here's $50. Right.
Yes,
this is the opportunity, right? This is somebody like just giving you a bunch of leads, a bunch of donor leads, handing them to you on a platter and saying, this is a group of people that potentially you can raise money from later. Don't screw it up. Right. So using the lens and the, as a former CFO and somebody who enjoys math, I totally get the like, oh my gosh, this is a pain in the ass. Like, how dare you dump all these people on me and have me do this ridiculous thing so that these people can feel good about their day. Like, you're looking at it with the wrong lens. The lens needs to be completely flipped around and think of it as from a development opportunity side and not necessarily from we're going to get some good work out of these people, because they're honestly not there for work. They're there because they don't have to go to work, and they might get a box lunch that has chili cheese Doritos in it, or chili cheese what are they? Fritos. Chili cheese Fritos. Yeah. Also, they always only show up in box lunches. You never find them anywhere else. I don't know why.
That was kind of random. No, I love everything you're saying, because I think it's sort of looking at it from the wrong perspective of, I mean, and there's times that certainly if you have kind of like a project that needs a lot of hands, sorting or stuffing or, assembling something or some facility improvement or something, sometimes a lot of hands can be helpful, and you can do this one-off thing and feel like you actually made some movement in a direction. And I think actually the volunteers like to see that too. So I think finding projects that people can actually feel like they made a difference is important. I will say this as someone who's volunteered on and off for different things throughout the years. There's times where I've left a volunteer experience and thought, no, they were just trying to keep me busy, right? They could have cared less, like they had no clue what to do with me. And then there were times where I actually felt like I truly helped and mattered. And you want to try to figure out, it's a beautiful recipe for, you get someone who goes, gosh, like that was cool and that was fulfilling and that filled my bucket. And to your point, Andy, that it's a gold mine. Like, it's a great engagement tool. I love it. I also have seen some organizations have started to move toward, depending on how they view volunteerism, to the point of this question, they've also started to package it where it's like, hey, with a sponsorship, it cost us money to actually put on and organize a volunteer event. So with a sponsorship of X, we allow you to, we'll organize a lovely custom event for your team to come in and then you got to knock it out of the park if you're doing that, right? It's got to be a really good one. But I've seen organizations start to do that too, to try to recoup some of the staff time and whatever other costs that are involved in it. But overall, I couldn't agree more. I think, how do you not only build individual donors like relationships through these volunteers, over time, like leverage volunteers to be individual donors, but also how do you build a longer term partnership, perhaps with the organization or company that did this? Because I would also pitch it as, this doesn't have to be a one and done. What can we do to make this be something that is whether it takes place annually or if you're doing quarterly things, can we come up with something on a quarterly basis? So also getting kind of creative with how do you create that buy-in from the company, and you're saving them sometimes time because they're like, hey, like I get to go, great, I've got my charity partner for the year. We're going to do these 3 events, volunteer events, and then whatever, like, and it's another way to sort of explore how you build a longer term relationship by thinking about it that way. But no, I love it. Volunteers, Andy, I don't know if you find this in some of your work with organizations or conversations, but I'm always surprised at how many feel guilty or like they can't ask volunteers to make a donation because the volunteers are already giving their time. And yet, if you look at all the data, it shows that it is one of the most powerful, indicators of getting a donation is if someone has engaged with you in some other way, including giving their time, because they're just more bought in. So start with that.
Yeah. I mean, I think the exit through the gift shop kind of mentality, I think maybe you don't want to come across as like, okay, we forced you to come here, we made you do a thing, and now before we let you get back on the bus, we're going to guilt you into writing checks. I mean, nobody's going to appreciate that experience at all. But thinking about ways that you can follow up with some, ask if you can follow up with the individual volunteers, if it's possible to be able to send them a thank you note that talks about what happened with the thing that they did. And then, make sure that person somehow gets in the direct mail stream so that later on they can get more information about the organization and potentially have the opportunity to donate later, right? Because now it's not like back in the olden days where the only way you could donate is by writing a physical check and putting it in an envelope with a stamp, right? Now there's infinite number. You can give with your phone. There's really infinite ways to be able to give. So there doesn't have to be a formal process of making the ask directly at the time that the donor was there, right? If you've got a phone number, you can make an ask. So I don't know. The hard part though is really coming up with something that is meaningful, that doesn't feel like busy work. Like, right, you said, when you go into a volunteer opportunity and you feel like they've just, they could get anybody to stuff envelopes, and I just happen to be here, the person that's stuffing envelopes today. That doesn't really give me I don't feel more connected to the mission because I got a paper cut on my tongue. That coming up with something that's like has something to do with the mission at the food bank was super easy. Again, food banks are like cheating, but like we would just pack bags full of food, and you can talk about who the food is going to and why they need the food and how you pick the food and where the food comes from and the donations that are required in order to get not only the food, but the fuel for the trucks to get the food distributed. Like, you have the opportunity to talk about the entire program while someone's physically handing, putting cans of whatever into a box that they know a second grader is going to eat. Like, it's really easy to do that way. So for your organization, see if you can come up with a way that is a volunteer opportunity. It's a great challenge. What's a volunteer opportunity that you can do that's specific to your mission that has the same sort of tactile and mission benefits as packing a box of food for a second grader? Is there something you can get to that's that same level of understanding of how the mission works? And I think you're golden. I have been the executive director for a year, dealing with a challenging founder who was moved to a board position after retiring from the ED role at our organization. Do you have any suggestions for how to get the founder off of the board? Is there any way I can broach this as the ED?
Oh, that is tricky, isn't it? Oh, these founder questions. So I think the short answer is no. I don't think you can broach this directly with the founder as the ED. I think your best strategy would be to perhaps see if anyone on the board, it'd be even better if it was the board chair, are aligned with you, or could maybe see it from your vantage point, and maybe you could have just sort of a sit down conversation about, hey, here's what we're running into with the founder. And I know this person did amazing things. Can we think through a way to either minimize this or perhaps see if we can shift the founder to another role? Like, that's the way I would approach it, because I think you need to at least share that there's some challenges and things that are being faced, and that the board may be oblivious to or just not see it in the same way. And so I think if that could jeopardize, what I see is so many times, right, you get an executive director who follows a founder and doesn't speak up and then just leaves. And that actually hurts. And the organization can't figure out always why. I mean, or they just don't really want to, they're in denial. They don't actually want to look at the reason. So I think talking to the board chair and helping the board chair understand why, why the founders being on the board is problematic. And then hopefully maybe if there's a way to develop some sort of strategy that perhaps, if there was you're going to need a board to get behind it, right? You can't just unilaterally make this decision and get the founder off the board. So you can't have a board chair that's just going to be like, hey, you're causing problems, get off the board, right? I mean, but there certainly could be a conversation with the founder by the board chair or by one of the other board members to say, hey, like, here's what we're running into some challenges with. We know you mean well. What do you think if we were to sort of have you, maybe we have you step off the board for at least this transition period and revisit in a year whether this makes sense. So you've had some separation from the organization. The organization has had some time for the new leader to sort of grow, their credibility, and then revisit this. And that's a hard conversation. No one wants to have that conversation, right? And that goes back to saying, so what's the trajectory of a founder, and boards really being cautious not to just allow this to happen, or a founder to kind of just move themselves into the role of a board member, but really being thoughtful, because it's like nobody wants to inherit that. And it's very few founders. There's some who can do it, but in my experience, there's very few that actually can do it well, because it's their baby. It's like, imagine, Andy, right? It's your baby, this thing you've grown from the ground up and put your blood, sweat, and tears and passion and money and everything in between into it. And now you have to let it go and let someone else run with it, and try to remove yourself enough so that you're not still wanting to make decisions, or you don't think, like, if something seems like a stupid idea, you're not jumping. Like, that is really hard. And most people can't do that. And it doesn't mean that they're bad people. They just can't. And so that's why having some separation is important. And I'm sorry the person writing this question is in the situation, because that it is so much harder now that the founder's on the board than if it would have never happened to begin with. And the only strategy I have is to have a real heart-to-heart with someone on the board who's a safe space, who might be able, and if it's your board chair, and try to help problem solve together, or figure out if there's ways the board chair can maybe be a buffer, or try to rein in the founder a bit more, or even say, hey, founder, let us honor you and give you this amazing sort of other role with the organization that isn't a board role, and see if you can transition that way. So it's tough, though. There's no real easy solution to this one, I'm afraid.
Yeah. It seems like it should work, though, with some, because a board member is just one of a group of people who are there to do governance activities. And I think probably what the issue is that that's not what's happening, is that we didn't get one person moving on to the board to just do governance activities. We ended up with the sort of unpaid shadow executive director who always has opinions about everything and isn't really, and the board, again, we've talked about this all the time. The board members just show up and they're only thinking about you for the time that they're in the meeting. Yeah. And so it's really nice for them to sort of just take part of their brains out and say, we're just going to let this person do it because they're the founder and they're thinking about the organization way more than I am. So they clearly have a better idea about what we're supposed to do. That sounds fine to me, right? Because they have no blowback. It's going to work out. It'll be fine. I think, one of the things that I would say is, one of, my personal, I know Stacey and I differ on this one. One of my personal rules is I would never take a job with the word interim at the beginning of it. The other thing is I don't think I would ever take an ED position where the founder was on the board. I think that's just a dangerous scenario when you're walking into it. And you know what? I'm sure, when you're evaluating a role, you never know. You could throw that into your negotiation for the position. Like, tell you what, I will take 2 fewer vacation days if the founder's not on the board. Can we do that? But once you're in that scenario, really, everything Stacey said is exactly right. You just have to, find someone that can be someone on the board that can understand where you're coming from as an executive director, that like, these are the specific roles that we need to inhabit. Like, this is the role of a board member. It's to advise. It's to make sure that the governance is working, and it's to do the things that we as staff ask them to do if we need them to help us out with particular things. It's not to run the organization. That's for the professional staff to do. And if the ED, we've said this before, founders aren't like evil people. Like we talk about them a lot of times as if they're just like the worst. But the truth is they're, like you said, they're very passionate about it. And the reason that they have their fingers in everything is exactly like you said. Like they've done it before. They know what works. And when they see it going sideways, they get upset, right? And then they have a lot of extra pull. So, coming up with a way for the founder to understand, like, if you can't control yourself, maybe you need to step away. Like, again, that's a super hard conversation to have. And it's not your job as the ED to have that with the founder.
Oh, not
unfortunately.
At all. And I also think on a practical measure, do you have board terms? Because board terms can sometimes be the ticket. I mean, if you knew you only had 1 more year left, right, with the founder before their term, then your goal is, and you think you can work with that, then can you strategically start to plant seeds so that that you suggest, hey, why don't we move the founder to this role? Like, let's say, thank you, we needed you here for that continuity, blah, 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 whatever you got to say for that transition. But let's see if we can move them to another role. So, but I'm going to assume that probably either there's no terms here or the terms are not short term. So you may be stuck for a while.
Thanks for joining us today. Stacey and I really appreciate that you've taken your time out of your day to listen to us babble about nonprofit topics. We enjoy the fact that we get to do this. It makes us happy to do. It's always nice to kind of hang out and talk together. And please send us those questions. If you like the podcast, fantastic. Share it with folks. Go on to wherever you found this podcast and find the button to rate it, or we have a couple of helpful links in the show notes, which are at nonprofiteverything.com. There's also information about if we mentioned any links or anything today, or further reading or resources like that. Those can be found in the show notes as well at nonprofiteverything.com. But share it, rate it. If you've got questions for us, send it to us. You can send them to questions@nonprofiteverything.com, or find us on most of the socials. Or you can go to the Nonprofit Everything webpage, and there's a big yellow button that says Ask a Question, and you can click that, and it'll send us a question directly from the website as well. And with that, we really appreciate that you've taken the time today, and we will talk to you again in a couple of weeks.